Welcome back, parents. I am thrilled to have you here joining me for another episode of Beautifully Complex. This week, today, I want to talk to you about how pressure isn't motivating, it's actually dysregulating. We live in a culture, in an age where we are told that if we just push a little more, that kids will rise to the occasion. And this is especially true in our education system. The the whole crux of teaching and getting kids to do what you're asking them to do is by putting pressure on them. You're getting graded. Your grades matter to go to college. College matters to be a successful adult. And so many of those things aren't necessarily true, and they're not true for everyone. But our system and our society has adopted this belief that pressure is motivating. And the opposite is actually true. Pressure is going to dysregulate the nervous system. And when the nervous system is dysregulated, the access to the thinking brain dims. And if we are dysregulated enough, access to the thinking brain is cut off entirely. So we are pushing to get this kid to do this thing we want them to do. And what we are creating is an environment where they have less capability of doing the thing that we want them to do. And so we are sort of shooting ourselves in the foot with this idea that pressure will motivate. And when we add in that layer of neurodivergence, many of our kids are even more sensitive to the pressure. So it has an even greater impact of dysregulation and creating an environment where capability is lost. I know that there's so many times as a parent where you feel like you've got to add some pressure because things are not happening. And we know that ADHD brains are kind of sparked. Everything gets online and working at full capacity by urgency and interest, but not by importance. And so when we have something that's important and our kids don't feel that it's important, or they're just not able to get something done solely on the basis that it's important, then we add pressure. That is our go-to, and it's what we're taught. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not shaming anyone. It is absolutely 100% the way we were raised and what we were taught. But now that we are getting to know the nervous system better, we are getting to know that this is a fallacy. And we have to pivot and make a change because the more pressure we add to our neurodivergent kids, the less capable they are of doing the thing that we're asking them. The less doability exists in that scenario. I learned this lesson the really hard way from my own kid, who finally, around high school age, was able to tell me the more pressure you put on me, the less I am able to do what you're asking, and the less I want to do what you're asking. So that's a double whammy against us right there. And we're coming into it with the best of intentions, out of love, out of caring, out of trying to prepare them to be an adult, to prepare them for a successful future, right? But we're actually doing things that cause discomfort, that cause harm. This isn't the kind of discomfort that's good, that helps to build grit and resilience. This is the kind of discomfort that shuts everything down, makes our kids withdraw from us. Because if we're constantly putting pressure on them and pressure makes them shut down, pressure makes them dysregulated, it makes them feel bad, then they're going to stop talking to us so that we don't have the opportunity to put that pressure on them, right? That's what any human being would do. It's just common sense. So we're coming from love and fear, not cruelty, but we have to make a pivot. Pressure just does not create motivation. It is actually read by the autonomic nervous system as threat. I want you to hear that. So I'm going to say it again. Pressure is read by the autonomic nervous system as threat. And when the nervous system thinks that there is a threat, when it senses danger, whether it's physical danger, emotional, mental, psychological, social, learning, and cognitive, any of those dangers, the nervous system is looking for them, and it is going to instinctually respond in dysregulated ways to try to protect. So you're going to see fight, flight, or freeze. So we're trying to create motivation, but we're actually creating challenging behavior and less doability. Now that we understand the body and the nervous system, we know that when pressure rises, the thinking brain dims. That bodyguard is stepping in to protect because it has sensed danger, that pressure. And what happens is we get a whole lot of responses that we don't want, that are not helpful for anyone. And let me just also add, our kids don't want it either. Our kids do not want to be in fight, flight, or freeze either. No one enjoys that. They want to be able to meet your expectations, to please you, to do what you're asking. But when we add pressure as a mechanism to sort of force compliance, if we're being real about it, we are actually making things less doable. And that behavior is a signal. It is a signal that there's too much pressure. We need to pull back. We need to potentially lower demands or expectations, not forever. We're not being permissive. We're not giving up on our kids. We are just stretching the timeline. When we interpret avoidance as laziness, adding pressure is going to create more avoidance, not less. When we interpret shutdown as refusal, that pressure is going to create more shutdown, not less. When we interpret resistance as defiance, you guessed it, we're going to create more resistance, not less resistance. So how do we support our kids? How do we help to make sure things get done without using pressure as the tool? Because it is a broken tool. It is not going to be helpful. Here are some phrases that I often hear from parents that are actually pressure. You're capable of more. If you try harder, you could do it. You were able to do it yesterday. Why can't you do it today? This isn't hard. You need to learn to push through. Sometimes it's, I'm going to ground you. I'm going to take away your electronics. I'm going to give you this other punishment. Because punishment is also a form of pressure, pressuring a kid to make different choices. And that's why it often backfires for our neurodivergent kids. Support sounds a whole lot different. It might be something about this feels like too much. I notice that you seem to be overwhelmed right now. Let's figure out what your system needs first. Let's figure out how to help your body feel more steady first. The key distinction here is that expectations without regulation cannot be met. And that creates rupture in our relationships with our kids. When we are regulated, we have access to skills. We have access to the thinking brains. We have access to executive functioning skills. We have access to all of the skills that we've been learning. We have access to problem solving and strategizing. And these are all crucial to being able to get things done, especially in the ways that our parents and our educators expect us to. Yes, there's some grief within this conversation. I know that that is true. I know that that is real for most of you. It's not that we have to do everything differently for our kids. We're actually teaching a skill that would make the human experience better for all of us. Self regulation, emotional regulation leads to a more fulfilling life for every human being. So we are actually paying attention to something that every parent, every educator should already be paying attention to. We didn't know that until recently, but now we know. And that's why we're having conversations like these, letting go of timelines, letting go of comparing your kid to other peers, letting go of this path or this success that you imagine for your kid is really hard. And you don't necessarily have to let go of these things forever. It is a not yet, not a not ever. So let's talk about what does actually build motivation here, because I have just debunked the idea that adding pressure to kids or adults builds motivation. We know that it is disrupting the nervous system, is causing dysregulation, is causing the thinking brain and strategies and skills to be unattainable. So, what does build motivation? It is an outcome. It's not a lever that we can pull and like increase the motivation in our kid whenever we want to do it. It is an outcome of circumstances, environment, and things like that. So it grows from felt safety, which we were just talking about. That is not just physical safety, psychological, emotional, mental, cognitive, social safety, all of those areas. Predictability increases doability. Small, doable wins, noticing them, noticing them. So we're not just creating them. That's very, very important because when our kid has wins, they are more likely to be willing and able to challenge themselves more and to keep trying. But we have to notice them. We have to say out loud, I saw this thing that happened. You don't have to offer trumped up praise, but you do have to notice and help your kid to notice it as well. And then motivation also grows from autonomy that is supported and not forced. So we're not cutting kids off, we're not letting them fail. That does not do anyone any favors. I would never, ever advise for a family to let a kid fail, but we are offering bounded choices, bounded control, bounded autonomy. The more that a kid feels like they're in control, the less anxiety they're going to have, the less dysregulation they're going to have. So the more opportunity for motivation that they have. And sometimes when something is up to you and you got to choose, you have more buy-in, so you're going to have more engagement. Let's think about how this needs to be more of a relief for you and not a responsibility. I don't want you to think about the fact that we need to stop pressuring our kids as yet another thing that you need to put on your to-do list and another thing that you're responsible for on your side of parenting your kid. Instead, think about the relief that it will create. This pivot from pulling back on the pressure, letting kids lead more, is going to provide relief for both of you. They're going to have relief from the pressure and the dysregulation, and you're going to have relief from the power struggle that I know you don't enjoy. You'll be relieved from the nagging that is probably happening in trying to get things done. So, reducing pressure isn't lowering the bar. It isn't giving up on our kids. It isn't being permissive of behavior that we don't approve of. It's building the foundation for things to be successful. It's building the foundation for doability. It's building the foundation of willingness, of engagement, of buy in, all the things that actually do help to create more motivation. So the long game is always nervous system first, regulation first. We must be regulated to have access to our thinking brain. The thinking brain is where executive function is. What is executive function? It is the skills we need to do things, to get things done, to manage them. If we don't have access to that, nothing can get done. We can't use skills that we know that we were able to use yesterday or last week. We can't use strategies that were taught to us. We can't call on anything that we already know. And we likely can't process language and other input coming at us. So with that pressure might be a lot of talking and a lot of language that is just overwhelming your kid's nervous system more and is dysregulating them more. So we must be regulated first. Then we can access skills. Then we can learn. Now we're available biologically to learn. And then later we can add independent skills to that as well. But regulation is the foundation. Nothing else can happen without it. If you have a kid who's more often than not dysregulated, very little is getting done, and it is definitely not being done efficiently or productively. And there's probably a lot of emotions and a lot of big behaviors too, because regulation has to happen for anything else to happen. This is permission, really, for you to focus on regulation first. You don't need to focus on getting that math worksheet done first. You don't need to focus on your kids' social skills first. You can put that stuff off into the future some, because you need to work on regulation first, because that stuff isn't going to get better without that self-regulation, that emotional regulation. Okay. So let's just wrap up what we've learned here. Pressure is not motivating. Pressure is dysregulating. Pressure reduces or cuts off entirely access to the thinking brain. We need the thinking brain for things to be doable. We need the thinking brain to do tasks. We need it to plan, organize, manage time. We need it to call on skills. We need it to call on strategies. So if there's pressure, there is no doability. If your kid is sending you signals that pressure is not helping, listen. When your kid is saying it to you bluntly, like my kid did, listen. It's still really hard to pivot away from using pressure as a motivator. I still sometimes struggle and I have to catch myself and pull back. It is something that is really ingrained in us over the decades that we have been on this planet and learning from other people. There are alternatives. And my favorite alternative, the one that works for my own kid, is I'm here when you're ready. I'm here when you need me. How can I help you? What do you need in order to get this thing done that needs to get done? So I'm not going to threaten you. I'm not going to hound you and nag you. I'm not going to push you, but I am here to support. And I would like to know what you need so that I can support. And then leave it. Just leave it. They may not have a response to that yet. They're not ready for the support. They're not ready to tackle it. They will come around to it. Now, I can hear some of you saying, my kid won't come around to it. There's no way. If I just don't pressure, nothing's going to get done. And for some kids, that's true. My kid was not into school. He did not care about his school performance. Yes, he would love to be a straight A student. He would love to have been a good student in the ways that society measures that, right? Honor roll, good attendance, those sorts of things. But it didn't matter enough to him to be able to motivate to do all of the work. So I did have to stay there with some external motivation, but I had to lean into regulation. I had to lean into my kid's timeline. I had to lean into the ways that my kid wanted to get things done. And sometimes I had to lower expectations and lower demands to meet times when there was burnout, when there was emotional health struggles, mental health struggles, right? So this can ebb and flow based on meeting your kid where they are on that day, in that moment, in that environment. Their nervous system is asking for safety. When it senses safety, they are regulated. When they are regulated, they can get things done and they can connect with you, which I know so many of our families crave, that real connection, that parent child relationship that they imagined. And when we add pressure, we're actually pushing that possibility further away. So think about connection, think about how to help your kid regulate, and be aware of when you're adding pressure and how you can pull back the pressure. Ask your kid what they need. Ask your kid what will help them. Ask your kid what their timeline is, and then honor it. We have to honor it. Pressure isn't a problem you need to solve. Pressure is something you just need to be aware of and pull back on. Regulation and safety are always the path forward. They're always the foundation for productivity, for efficiency, for motivation, for grit, for resilience, all of the things, for relationships and social interactions that are positive. So focus on how can you reduce pressure? What can you do differently in order to help your kid to be their best version of themselves, to be the best version of who they were supposed to be. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. You can go to parentingadhdandautism.com for the show notes for this episode and other episodes of Beautifully Complex. I hope to see you in the next episode. Take good care, everyone.